Everyone is talking about Lieutenant Nazario, an Army officer who has filed a lawsuit against two police officers over the manner in which they conducted a traffic stop in December. There are a lot of interesting things happening in the video of that traffic stop, and people on both sides are getting things wrong. So I decided to throw in my 2 cents. As usual, this incident is much more complicated than one might think. First, I want to start this video by saying there is a lot of information I don't have. So I'll be doing my best to get everything as accurate as possible, but there may be some things I get wrong. Since writing the script, for example, a video has been posted showing the events after the traffic stop, but that's not what I'll be focusing on, so I have not incorporated any information from that into this video. There is, of course, a chance that there is information that I did not find that is very relevant to this. If that's the case, I do encourage you to go into my comment section. Let me know. We can have a reasonable conversation. I do encourage you to be reasonable about this because there's a lot of anger regarding this incident. And I get that. I understand it. But please, behave yourself. Here's what I pieced together. Prior to the incident, which is the traffic stop, Lieutenant Caron Nazario was driving a newly purchased Chevy Tahoe on Highway 460 in Windsor, Virginia. A police officer saw Nazario's vehicle. He noticed that he didn't have a license plate and attempted to pull Nazario over. Nazario, in violation of Virginia Code 46.2-829, did not immediately pull over for the police. That's right, the code requires you to, quote, as quickly as traffic and other highway conditions permit, drive to the nearest edge of the roadway, clear of any intersection of highways, and stop and remain there, end quote. So, why didn't he do that? Nazario stated he wanted to pull into somewhere better lit, which isn't a terrible idea, usually, assuming the well-lit area is very nearby. I'm talking like 1 or 2/10 of a mile. But he drove almost an entire mile, or 100 seconds, according to one article, to a BP gas station, that's British Petroleum, near the intersection of Church Street and Highway 460. And by doing so, he made things much more complicated. Now, what would have been a better option for Nazario? Having reviewed the road that Nazario was on in Google Maps, it doesn't appear to have any streetlights, so it would have been dark. However, police vehicles have a lot of lights on them, just a significant amount. And I'll be honest, I miss those lights on the police vehicle because they're incredibly useful, the spotlight specifically. But that's not what this is about, so we're going to keep moving. Police also carry flashlights, so if there was a concern about the interior of the vehicle being very dark, because there were tinted windows, I'm not going to argue about how heavily tinted they are, but they were certainly tinted enough to make it difficult to read the temporary tag in the window. Well, if you're concerned about that, you could always turn on the interior dome light of your vehicle. Just a thought, it's not required, but it may not be a bad idea, certainly at night. If Nazario wanted to make sure people didn't sideswipe them during the traffic stop, well, the road was very straight, so that would have been an unlikely occurrence. Nazario did say, though, that he made the decision, quote, for officer safety and out of respect for the officers, end quote. And if that was truly the case, I would have recommended he pull over, and then when approached by the officer, he could have suggested that they continue the interaction at the gas station. If this was truly about helping the officer, and the officer declined the offer, then, hey, you tried, no hard feelings, on with the traffic stop. Now, at the moment, we have Nazario for violating Virginia Code 46.2-716 for obscuring the temporary tag, 46.2-829 for failure to yield, and, hold on a minute, we have a third one, which is 46.2-817, eluding the police. Now, I did not know this when I first started doing my research, but Virginia has a couple versions of eluding. I don't believe every state does. If you receive the signal to stop and you just keep going, that's a misdemeanor. It's only a felony if you drive the vehicle dangerously. The problem here is that Nazario stated he slowed down. Some articles say he used his hazards, which is a pretty recognizable symbol of, I see you, I'm going to keep going for a bit though, now that that makes it lawful. Some articles say he only used a turn signal, and this is very important what he did, so let's pause again to discuss this. First, if you intend to keep going for a bit when police signal for you to pull over, hazards are the way to go. However, a mile is almost certainly too long, especially when there are plenty of places to pull over. I get it if you're on a bridge with nowhere to pull over and you want to get to the other side of that bridge and find a spot to sit, that's totally fine, but Nazario didn't have that problem. I do actually have a bit of advice for police. If the person you're trying to pull over isn't pulling over, but you think they're trying to pull over somewhere else, get on your megaphone, your PA system, whatever you have, and tell them to stop. I don't know if the police did this, though, because I haven't seen any footage that shows much of the pursuit, and that's a problem. Why? Because when Nazario did stop, police treated it as if Nazario was eluding feloniously. So one of two things happened. Either Nazario didn't drive in the manner in which he stated he did, or the police messed up real bad. Food for thought. Now, if I wanted to find out what actually happened, if there was a camera on the police vehicle, that would be a very important thing to acquire. Police statements of the incident obviously would be important to acquire. The original statement made by Nazario would be important to look up and read. All of those things would be necessary. I don't have those things, though. However, this is relevant today. It may not be relevant by the time I get these things. So if I want to get you all the information that I think is important for people to know based on what happened in this incident, unfortunately, I'm going to have to skip that, and you're going to have to forgive me. Now, the police did treat this as a felony traffic stop and drew their guns on Nazario. This is generally what happens when a person is stopped for a felony. Pause. I'm not going to debate whether or not the eluding was felonious because I don't have evidence either way. I'm just sharing the information I do have. I can confirm the fact that a traffic stop was appropriate. Why? It turned out he did have a temporary plate. Why would this be appropriate? Well, he did have it. Yes, he had the temporary piece of paper that you slap in your window. But I'm going to tell you something that I've told many people over the years. If you have a temporary plate in a tinted window and it can't be read from the lawfully required distance, you are wrong. My suggestion is to make copies of it, put those copies in document protectors, post one of those copies on the outside of your vehicle, and if it goes missing, either because someone stole it or it fell off for whatever reason, you slap another copy on there. I don't know if every state just has normal printed copies or if some of them actually have, stamps, signatures, whatever. I can't confirm this will work everywhere, but it is definitely something that I would recommend looking into, especially if you have dark tinted windows, which do not allow the appropriate posting of that piece of paper. Now, you could maybe just tape it on the back, but then, of course, weather could be a problem and losing it could be a problem. So if you have a temporary tag, consider what your options are. Don't put it behind heavy tint. Don't. Now, when the police had their guns drawn, they issued a series of instructions. Those instructions weren't great. In fact, let me read them to you. Driver, roll your window down. Put your hands out of the window. Turn your vehicle off and put your hands out of the window. Put your hands out of the window and turn your vehicle off. Put your hands out of the window. Let me see your hands. How many occupants are in the vehicle? Open the door slowly and step out. These are all direct quotes from what they said. And can you spot the issue? How is Nazario going to turn off his vehicle when his hands are outside the window? What if his door is locked? It was. He can't open it from the outside. This is a pretty big mistake by the police officer. Based on my training experience, here's what the commands should have sounded like. Something like this. Driver, do not make any sudden movements. Driver, roll down your window and unlock your vehicle. Driver, place both hands out of the window. Driver, while keeping your left hand out of the window, take your right hand and place your vehicle in park. Driver, put your right hand back outside of the window. Maintain both hands out of the window until I tell you otherwise. Driver, while keeping your left hand out of the window, take your right hand and turn off the vehicle. Driver, place both hands out of the window. Driver, while keeping your right hand out of the window, open your door with your left hand. Do not reach back inside the vehicle. Driver, while keeping both hands in the air, put your left foot out of the vehicle. Driver, while keeping your hands in the air, put your right foot out of the vehicle. Driver, without turning around, I say again, without turning around, keep your hands in the air and slowly step backwards towards the sound of my voice, etc., etc. Now, there are other commands that you would do if there are multiple occupants. In fact, one of my earlier commands probably should have been all occupants, put your hands out of the window, something like that. But it is very slow. It is very methodical. It sounds really stupid when you read it like that because you're like, well, obviously. Well, what you have to understand is that in high-stress situations, people aren't going to follow instructions very well, and police need to know this. This is incredibly important. But it wasn't just the police who messed up here. Nazario, he done goofed. He's trying to figure out why police are doing this. Now, this is not the time and the place to be refusing to follow instructions. Nazario even plays the I'm a soldier card, which doesn't help him, nor should it really. Police don't have to tell Nazario what is happening until it is safe to do so. Because he failed to obey, he can now be charged under Virginia Code 18.2-460 for obstruction, something the officers actually tell him, although they say that he's detained for obstruction. No, he's detained for the plate. The obstruction is just a different thing. It was weird. There are a lot of things with the police where it looks bad, where people say, this is a training issue. And there are a lot of times they go, no, this isn't actually a training issue. This is a, make quick decisions to the best of your ability issue, or it's an accountability issue or something. This one is a training issue. This is a training issue. This video, training issue. There's a lot that went wrong here that is directly, I would believe, a result of poor training or a lack of retraining. A lack of yearly, annual, monthly, semi-annual, whatever training. There is a lack of it here. Things that should not be happening. So, a lot of issues. A lot of issues. Now, this is where Nazario's attorney messed up. After Nazario repeatedly asked what was going on, the officer stated, "You're fixing to ride the lightning. That's what's going on." Nazario's attorney claimed that the officer was making a reference to the electric chair, citing the movie The Green Mile, which is absurd. Riding the lightning is law enforcement slang for being tased. When I hear ride the lightning, a taser is the first and only thing that comes to mind. And if you watch the video, you actually see the officer draw a taser when he says it. He puts his pistol back in his holster on the right side, draws his taser from the left side of his duty belt, transfers it to his right hand. The non-dominant side of the officer is traditionally where the less lethal devices are, so that the officer doesn't accidentally draw the wrong item. Oh gosh, where do I keep my thing, right? Once upon a time, they used to keep the taser and their firearm on the same side because generally you draw faster with your dominant hand, and sometimes you want to draw the taser quickly. But what happened was at least one officer drew the gun by mistake instead of the taser and shot someone. So now they generally don't do that anymore. And that's what we see here. The taser comes off from the left side. You can see it's a taser, and it's very, very clear that the reference to riding the lightning was related to tasers. Nazario's attorney made himself look very foolish when he said that. And the defense, if a defense is mounted for these officers as opposed to just a payout, I assume will tear into that because that's very indicative of a lack of understanding when it comes to police training, behavior, etc. It's not going to, ruin the case for Nazario by any means, but it's sort of like a, that's kind of a blunder there. After this, Nazario does state that he's afraid to get out, at which point the officer says, "You should be afraid." Nope, wrong. The officer messed that one up. That's not something you say. In fact, that should have been the cue to begin attempts to de-escalate. Now, de-escalation isn't always successful, and it isn't always appropriate, but it probably wouldn't have hurt them to stop yelling for a moment and say in a calmer voice, "We observed you committing a felony." Whether or not that's true, and to be fair, telling someone you think they committed a felony isn't always the best move. "And we are conducting a felony traffic stop." I get that this is a lot right now, but if you just cooperate, we can put these away, relax a little bit, have a conversation about what happened. We're not going to begin that conversation until you are out of the vehicle. Once we check that you are armed, that you aren't a threat or within reach of a weapon, we'll put our weapons down and we will talk. But we can't do that until you're out of the vehicle. You are legally required to get out of the vehicle. We do not want this to become more than it needs to be. Please unlock your vehicle, take off your seatbelt in slow controlled motions, open your door, and step out with your hands up. Please, right? Obviously, this yelling thing that they're doing is not working. They yelled, something, I was told the count was about over 50 times. Police said something along the lines of step out of your vehicle or whatever. That's a lot, and it's not working. So you got to change tactics. Now, instead of attempting to de-escalate, which would have been probably a good idea, they went in a different route. Now, that is something that we will discuss in a moment. But first, I want to move on to our next problem. Nazario tries to play roadside lawyer. No, bud. No, bad move. First, while the officers may be going overboard, the traffic stop is legitimate, as we've already discussed, which means I get to bring up one of my favorite Supreme Court cases, Pennsylvania versus Mims, which states that an officer can order you out of a vehicle for the mere reason that a traffic stop is occurring. There are other Supreme Court cases that also confirm this. There's one that even says that you can be ordered to stay in the vehicle, and that is a lawful order. We're not going to get into that. I just want you to know that there is a Supreme Court case. There are multiple ones, Pennsylvania versus Mims. It's a great one to read if you haven't. It gives you a lot of very good information. I'd also like to point out that just because you don't know something isn't a crime doesn't mean the police don't know that something is a crime. While arguing, and I want to give Nazario some credit for remaining calm during his arguing, he did get hit with a dose of OC spray. But hold on. Why? Why did they escalate to that point? Well, the officers had the right to get him out of the vehicle, and Nazario had already told them not to touch him. This indicates he might resist if attempts were made to physically pull him out of the vehicle. And a big, tough Army soldier is going to be a threat during a hands-on altercation. Additionally, have you ever tried to pull someone out of a vehicle who didn't want to come out? Even with two people doing the pulling, it's tricky. So we have a man who isn't going to exit the vehicle after verbal commands are given. There's reason to believe that physical force will be ineffective, so you have to keep escalating up the use of force continuum. Taser? Well, it's actually not such a great idea because it might cause his legs to extend into the gas pedal, causing the vehicle to rocket forward and endangering people, especially at a gas station. Now, you could drive stun, but you still have to reach into the vehicle to do that, at which point, what if he grabs your arm, pulls you in? Next stop would be OC spray. Well, I mean, it would disable his eyesight and distract him, making it easier to pull him out. So that's really not a bad idea, and that is what happened. Now, there is some concern about a dog that was in the vehicle when Nazario was sprayed. It inhaled some of the spray, and it was having some trouble breathing. The dog is fine, from what I understand, so I'm not going to touch on that. If police are going to OC spray you, and there are other people in the vehicle, my advice would be, don't get sprayed. Step out of the vehicle. They won't be subjected to the spray. I get it. That's not something a lot of people want to hear. But if the police are going to spray you no matter what, it might be in your best interest to obey the orders. Just a thought. At the end of all this, Nazario was never charged with a crime, which honestly is a pretty bad look for the officers. If you're going to go through all of that and you don't charge the guy, it kind of looks like an admission of wrongdoing. And it kind of looks like you know you messed up, but you didn't stop in the heat of the moment. You didn't take a step back. And now all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that was wrong. That's bad. That's bad for those officers, in my personal opinion, that they didn't charge him. It makes me think, and it would make a lawyer think, that the officers didn't charge him because they wanted him to drop this whole thing. And if they did charge him, he would have the chance to fight this in court and bring up a lot of things that the officers didn't want brought up in court. Unfortunately for those officers, a lawsuit was filed, so it is going to come up. But that's just a bad look. The rest of the information I have comes from news articles that have shared bits of information from the lawsuit or statements made by Nazario or his attorney. Supposedly, the stop was racially motivated, and the officers threatened Nazario by saying if he complained about them, then charges would be filed and his military career would be over. It also says his vehicle was illegally searched, but I'm fairly certain that was just a standard and lawful pre-tow inventory of the vehicle. Yes, there is a video that has a lot of the conversations that are referenced in the lawsuit. I have not watched it. It may be worth watching. I encourage you to do your own little bit of sleuthing. See how you feel about that. I'm just here to talk about the traffic stop. Now, I can't tell you if all the claims in the lawsuit are true or false, or if they present everything in the correct context. But I can tell you this. Nobody in this situation is without fault. I wanted to cover this because it's fairly complicated, and it draws attention to a lot of things that you shouldn't do as a driver and that you shouldn't do as a police officer. While I understand the actions taken by everyone involved, I can't support a lot of them. I would not be surprised if Nazario gets a settlement out of court because of all this. And Lieutenant Nazario, if you ever get stationed at JBLM or find yourself in Seattle, I'd love to buy you a beer and hear your side of the story. That's all I have for today. So until the next time, be good, stay safe.